We have here is quarterback Kyler Murray going from QB 14. These are all risers to start, 10 risers. QB 14 to QB 9. And in the overall, he went from 19 to 12.3. So a lot of moving up for Kyler Murray. I think this is the addition of Marvin Harrison because that's all that really changed, right, Fitz? I mean, it was Marvin Harrison. Obviously, we got some more quarterbacks, so it's a little surprising to see a quarterback rise, but he's behind at least Caleb Williams still. So I think this is mainly due to the fact that they got an alpha wide receiver after losing Marquise Brown, and we all saw what Trey McBride was doing, and maybe possibly a little bit people paying more attention right now. So what do you think contributed to Kyler Murray's ascension here?
I do agree that the Marvin Harrison addition was probably the big driver, Boggs. I wonder if anyone still had some sort of trepidation about whether Murray was going to be with the Cardinals long term, because we know a year ago when it looked like the Cardinals were going into full-on tank mode, trading their first-round pick to the Texans to accrue future first-round picks, that maybe people thought it might be heralding an eventual reset at quarterback for the Cardinals, that they might be in the quarterback market in 2024. But I think we've known since February that probably was not going to be the case. So I'm kind of surprised by the jump. It's a jump from 19th overall in startups to 12.3. So, people are holding Kyler in pretty high esteem for him to be going at the turn in Superflex startups now.
Let's talk about Baker Mayfield moving up more in the overall. He moved up in QBs from 25 to 22. 3 spots isn't a significant jump, but 69 to 59 in the overall. I have him closer to QB 27, so I'm still a little bit lower on Baker, but my guess for the rise on Baker Mayfield would be he re-signed with Tampa, and they re-signed Mike Evans. So if we're running back what we saw last year, it was a pretty good year for Baker. He's still going to be limited in terms of upside in years because he is getting a little bit further into his career here. But I don't know. Baker is still a pretty good asset to have, I think, in a super flex.
He is, Boggs, but I do wonder about how he's going to fare this year without Dave Canales, noted quarterback whisperer who has moved on to be the head coach at Carolina. And, whether he coaxed such a good season out of Mayfield last year. And I, as a Packers fan, I had to watch Baker Mayfield come into Lambeau Field and be the first visiting quarterback ever to put up a perfect passer rating in a single game at Lambeau. So yeah, he was pretty terrific last year. I don't know about this though. To me, late 5th round in a startup seems pretty aggressive for him.
Yeah, and I think that is because you get down to the people that aren't rostering quarterbacks fast enough, right? And when you get into these real drafts now, you have to have these QBs. Nobody's slipping through the cracks. We know where most of these guys are going to be, what their role is. So I think it's just we have the established guys, and it's probably maybe a little bit of a panicky move down at the end here. Let's talk some running backs. Josh Jacobs only moved up 1 spot positionally from RB14 to RB13, but he rose 10 spots in the overall, 78.8 to 68.5. I do have him as a low-end RB1. His ECR is 15 in terms of Dynasty for all of the rankers at Fantasy Pros. I think this rise is because, yes, they added Marshawn Lloyd, but this is a team that you think runs a lot. They didn't run as much as they have in the past last season. And I don't really know if I agree with this rise. So I don't know, Fitz. This is a fine spot for Josh Jacobs. But what do you think about your new Green Bay Packers lead running back raising in ADP here a little bit?
Like you, Boggs, I think I have reservations about this increase, this improvement in his ADP. I get it. I think people are bullish on the improved offensive ecosystem for Josh Jacobs. And undeniably, it's a step up, I think, going from the Raiders to the Packers in this promising young offense Green Bay has. But we talked about this on a redraft show we were just doing together. Matt LaFleur has not been a Like, he has not been a monogamous one running back type of guy throughout his career. And we saw A.J. Dillon consistently get around 10 carries a game, even when Aaron Jones was healthy, even though Aaron Jones is like miles better than A.J. Dillon. And I was talking about it when Matt LaFleur was the offensive coordinator and play caller for the Tennessee Titans in 2018. He had a split backfield with Derrick Henry and Dion Lewis. Derrick Henry only had 60 more carries than Dion Lewis that season. So anyone expecting Josh Jacobs to get 20 to 25 carries a game in Green Bay might want to go back and look at the Matt LaFleur track record on that, because Matt LaFleur has not been a workhorse running back type of guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think in this window that we have Jacobs, I think he's probably a better back than like Pacheco and Stevenson.
Maybe.
And
Boggs,
Pollard.
as a Packers fan, I was really surprised that Marshawn Lloyd was a third-round pick for Green Bay. I don't think Packers fans saw that one coming. And that might be a warning to anyone thinking about over-investing in Jacobs.
I think you're right, but I think with Marshawn Lloyd's injury history in college, he's a firm 2, right? Sure. Jacobs is a guy that can be the dude to carry the full workload. We've seen him do it before, which is why I'm still fairly bullish on him, but I don't know. The plan this year gives me a little pause. I actually have him lower in redrafts than I do in Dynasty, because I think overall he is a very good back. But I think the plan this year is to use all these backs. So we'll see what it looks like moving forward here. The next guy on the list, Raheem Mostert, went from RB 38 at 143.5 as his average draft position to RB 28, 120s. So a big rise here. And to me, it's gotta be the fact that Jalen Wright is more of a project. And I think a lot of people are thinking that Jalen Wright is more built in the role of Devin Achane. Dude, I've got a Mostert as RB 40. To me, his ECR is 42. So I feel like this is people getting desperate for a running back, seeing the production that Raheem Mostert had and reaching a little bit. I think that is mainly what it is. And I think, all of us psychos drafting in February are different to people drafting now. I think it gets a little, you get into more casual people drafting post NFL draft. So I think maybe that in his recent, big production season with all the touchdowns last year is why he's raising in ADP a little bit, but I'm not biting.
Yeah, how can anyone fail to get excited about this young go-getter at running back? It is curious to see this kind of a move up for an older back, a guy who's in his 30s, who's got a pretty extensive injury history, although he managed to stay healthy last year. I don't really have an explanation for it. I mean, it's fair to be optimistic about what he can do in that offense in 2024, because we saw what he did and what a prolific touchdown scorer he was last year. But yeah, I'm nowhere near RB 28 with Raheem Mostert in my rankings, just because he could turn into a cloud of dust in a heartbeat. His career could be
32 years old.
Yeah, one pulled hamstring and it could pretty much be the end of his career. So
that's walking with a cane in running back years. To be 32,
pretty much,
is just a bit much. And yeah, there's just so many guys. Zamir White, Jerome Ford, Chase Brown, Blake Corum, Jaylen Warren. These are all young backs well before 30 that I'm taking ahead of Raheem Mostert. Although, look, Raheem Mostert is a guy that could produce a lot for you this year, but I think Wright eats up more Mostert touches than he does Achane touches, because Achane wasn't getting a lot of touches anyway. So we'll see what happens with that Miami backfield. Zack Moss, now this one is pretty obvious. He goes from RB 54 to RB 33, and that's because he signed with Cincinnati. And in Cincinnati, there's a path to him to be the main back. You and I are both big Chase Brown believers. We're not really buying in to Zack Moss as a lead back. His ECR is 40. I have him in the 60s on my running backs. I'm not even taking him as an RB5 in most spots here, because this is a dude with an extensive injury history. The talent is there. Zack Moss is a good running back, Fitz, but I just don't think that he's going to be able to stay upright. And even if he is, I think Chase Brown is more talented. So for me, there's no way I'm buying this ascension for Zack Moss.
He had that great 5-week run at the beginning of 2023 where Jonathan Taylor was on IR and then Taylor comes off. And then the first week they kind of surprised us. Even with Taylor off IR, they gave Zack Moss most of the work Taylor's first week back. So he had the great 5-week stretch. From week 6 on, Boggs, Zack Moss averaged 3.6 yards per carry. He was back to being, oh, and by the way, let's not forget that it wasn't Zack Moss they initially had as the backup plan to Jonathan Taylor. Wasn't it Deion Jackson they wanted to throw out there first?
Actually, it was Evan Hull. And Evan Hull got hurt before the season started.
That's true.
So,
yeah, so
even more
he was the break glass in case of emergency guy. So I mean, like as far as long-term outlook, I'm skeptical. He's going to play a role, yes, but I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't turn out to be like the main early down back for the Bengals after all.
Yeah, it would absolutely not be surprising to me either here. Now, let's go to Puka Nacua, who is raising. It's not a ton, but with these small numbers, any move is significant. He went from wide receiver 8 to wide receiver 6. His ECR is 9. I have him at 12, but he went from a 3rd round pick at 27.5 to 19.3. And look, I love Puka. I think Puka is an awesome wideout, but I don't know. I think he was probably safer in the 3rd round. This is a dude that is going to have now Cooper Kupp back for most of the season. Puka had a little bit of an injury history in college as well. He didn't get hurt much last year, only like at the very end of the season. So that was a big step up for him. But it's not just repeating his rookie season. It's repeating this season at all. 1,400 yards receiving was unbelievable. So even if he has 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns, he's regressing. So it's tough to match this, but we've seen there's a lot of talent here. I don't really have a good reason for Puka to move up, specifically after the draft when, Neighbors and Harrison are going to be being drafted higher. So this one is genuinely a shock to me.
I agree. I don't understand this market shift from early 3rd round to mid 2nd round either, Boggs. Like what changed? Like maybe if Cooper Kupp had retired or something, I'd understand it, but that didn't happen. Like in seeing is believing with Puka, like that rookie season was very legitimate, and he managed to stay healthy despite sort of a troublesome college injury history. So that's encouraging. I don't really have a beef with the 19.3 overall ADP. I just don't understand why it had been so low beforehand, I guess. So it does seem like kind of a weird move over a span of 3 months that there's this increased market confidence in Puka.
And I have him in a tier with like A.J. Brown and Garrett Wilson and Tyreek Hill. I'm not like super low on him, and that tier goes to me from 7 to 12. So if you wanted to take him as high as 7, I totally understand. I'm just not taking above the top 4 and then the 2 rookies. I can't do. So 7 to me is the highest that Puka can go. So let's go to DeVonta Smith, moving from wide receiver 17 to wide receiver 13, which is actually a bigger shift in the 9 spots that he's moving in the overall to me. His ECR is wide receiver 16. This to me has to be because they just didn't add another big name wide receiver in the draft or free agency, right? So we're back to knowing for sure DeVonta Smith is the number 2 guy, which I kind of thought he was going to be anyway. I think with any wide receiver moving up, I'm going to be surprised because this class is so good and we start to see those rookies shift upwards. A lot of people drafting know the rookies, but some people don't. So when you're doing an initial draft, maybe they're not taking them as high as they should go in February before they have an actual team. So I think most of these receivers would move down because of the good class. And I like DeVonta Smith. I feel like I'm a giant DeVonta Smith fan, even though I'm much lower on ECR in my overall than he is here. So this one, again, leaves me scratching my head a little bit, Fitz.
Well, they paid him, Boggs. I think that's a big part of it, that they drove the Brinks truck up to his house. And I think maybe that does, like, I think there is something where that does have an impact on the market where people see that and they're like, oh, if the team loves him to this degree, maybe I should love him a little bit more too.
You know what? That's a really good explanation for it. To me, though, I don't know. AJ Brown is still really good. They added Saquon.
And
I don't know if this,
Hurts's efficiency as a passer nosedived without Shane Steichen as his mentor last year.
yeah. So, like, I don't know. I think I might have been a little happier if he hadn't signed that extension and maybe see if there are greener pastures elsewhere. So, to me, it doesn't make sense, but I understand the logic, and you pointing out the contract thing makes a lot of sense as well. This one I'm not so surprised about. Drake London goes from wide receiver 20 to wide receiver 14. That's an 11 spot jump in overall as well, from 52 to 41. I'm still a little bit lower on him. There's just so many good wide receivers, and that there is a big chunk of wide receivers I like later in the drafts as well. So this is because, to me, you have now two great quarterback options, right? You have Cousins or Penix, who, as we talked about in the Fantasy Pro show earlier, the flagship football show roearlier this week, there's no options. It's London, Pitts, and Bijan. So I don't have faith in Rondale Moore at all. I think Darnell Mooney could be a dude just because the quarterback play was so bad in Chicago, but this is because they didn't add anybody and they got good QB options and a new head coach coming over from LA, bringing in Zach Robinson, who's going to pass the ball way more than Arthur Smith did with his miserable run-only offense that I hate. That is now going to be my team's offense, but at least I'm not better about it. But Fitzy, is it just all these contributing factors adding up for London? Because I got to say, of the wide receivers raising, this is the least head-scratchy one.
Yep. And it's all those things and the fact that Drake London is still really young. I don't have it in front of me. I think he's still just 22 because he came into the league pretty young. So, all that. He does not have the headwinds that he was dealing with the last couple of years, especially the quarterback thing and also to a lesser extent, the play calling. Like, we thought he was going to be such a target hog last year, Boggs, and it just didn't happen. Like, somehow, despite the fact that the second best receiver on that team was Matt Collins, Drake London was still not among the target leaders when you would have imagined that he would be.
I think that Michael Pittman and Drake London are very similar in play style and skill. And Michael Pittman outscored him by a lot of points last year, right? And it's because of the QB and the way the offense ran. So getting a new, the biggest thing in here is getting a new quarterback, but just as big is probably the fact that they have a new coaching staff. And I think we can cut and print what we just said about Drake London because Kyle Pitts is a riser as well, only raising one spot overall in tight ends from 7 to 6, but from 74th pick to the 65th pick, raising 9 spots among tight ends is pretty strong. So it's just cut and print from what we said about London for Pitts, right?
It is the QB upgrade. We don't have a play caller who insists on giving half the tight end targets to Jonnu Smith when you've got Kyle Pitts there. And hopefully Pitts is going to stay healthy this year because he had that MCL sprain in 2022. Then we found out after the fact there was also, I can't remember if it was LCL or PCL damage, might have lingered into 2023, but now seemingly healthy, much improved quarterback situation, better play calling. Hopefully it's wheels up for Kyle Pitts.
And the last riser that we have is Dalton Kincaid, and this is just an easy picture to paint. It goes from tight end 8 to tight end 5, from 74.8 overall to 60.8 overall, raising 14 spots, a little more than a round. And this is because Keon Coleman was the only addition, and they traded Stephon Diggs. So you lose a target hog, you bring in a rookie to replace him, and now it looks like there's a bunch of targets available to be spread around, and Dalton Kincaid could be the main beneficiary.
Yeah, small sample size, but I believe over his last 2 regular season games, and if you'll recall, the Bills needed to win out to get into the playoffs, and their 2 playoff games, if you take those games, Kincaid had like 279 receiving yards or something like that, which works out to better than 1,000-yard pace. He really picked up the pace, and that was with Stephon Diggs around. Like, would not be a total shock if Kincaid led the Bills in targets this year.
Yeah, it really would not. So